let's try and have a look at this testing that I've done. So let's start out with the testing of my service right here, because that's the one that's kind of interesting. Service again, I'm writing a test right here to make sure. Right now, I've just made a basic test. So I put this up there for you guys. If you want to start writing your own tests, you have something to kind of check out right here, some starting point, right? And then I'm going to try and extend this Wednesday, where we're going to do some test-driven development. I'm going to try and show you how you can test the different areas, how easy it actually is. So what's a test all about? Well, it always starts with, it can always start with a describe, where I kind of explain what area am I trying to test. And this is a bad name, of course. It should say product service. I guess I did some copy pasting there. So I want to test the area of the product service right here, or that class. And what do? Well, first I mock out the product repository, because to create a product service, I'm going to need a product repository, right? I need that interface. So I mock that out right here. The next thing I'm doing is, right now, notice I'm not actually executing any code here. I'm just explaining I'm going to need a product repository of this type, and I'm going to need a product service of this type, right? And I'm going to need a product that looks something like this, right? So I'm just setting up some basic variables right here. And later on, I'm going to create a helper class that can make all of this for me, so it's easier. Instead of polluting this test right here, I'm going to make it easier to reuse the code, stuff like that. So now we have these three different things that I can start using, and then the before each is a way for me to set up. That's, you called that setup in the old, in C#. We could set up something before every test, and here before each test, I want to set up a product repository. Now the way you set it up is pretty simple. You go in and you create a new mock of that product repository, and again, this is not the Firebase implementation. This is just the interface. Okay, that's very important to know. It's just the product repository interface. Let's go back. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting up a mock for that. And when I have a mock, I can start actually faking what should happen in different scenarios. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to say, when I call the product repositories set top products with this product right here that I just created up here, the fake product, I want to return a new promise, and right now it doesn't do anything at all. It just returns a promise. It doesn't execute any code. But the cool thing is, if you notice right here, I completely decoupled myself from Firebase now. So I can run my unit test locally now without thinking about who actually stores the data, retrieves the data. I just decoupled myself completely from the repository architecture, right? I said I don't want to know how you get the data, where you get the data. I just want to know that when I call this method right here, I'm returning a promise containing some data, right? The second thing I'm doing is I'm creating a service. Now here, my service needs, in order to create the service, you need a product repository implementation. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, dear Mark, give me the object. And that's pretty much the same as if I did something like this, new product repository Firebase. Right now I'm getting an implementation. But notice right here, I'm now Firebase dependent. Let's undo that. But by doing this, again, I'm using this mock right here. So when I call set products, I'm calling this promise, and I'm not calling Firebase. I hope that makes sense. So what I'm doing here is pretty much, in order to create a service, I'm going to need a product repository implementation. I can't just have the interface like this. I need to have the actual object or the implementation class. That's what I'm doing with the mock right here. Sweet. This is going to make a lot more sense when I try and show you test-driven development later on. But the reason I want to do it like this is because we can actually start testing our code before we deploy it, meaning it's a lot easier to do local testing instead of having to deploy your code every time to do a test. So the only thing I did in my test right now is every time you write a test, you just write it, right? And then you give the test a name. So this is just an initialization saying that I should be able to, when I write products, right, I should call set top products exactly one time. That's all I'm verifying right here. I'm not doing anything. I'm calling write products, and notice I'm just passing in simple string and two simple objects right here, two simple products. And the reason I can do that is, again, because I decided to layer my code. I have layers. So I decided that my product controller, service, is just a stupid thing that gets 2 products and a string, right? By doing that, it's very easy for me to write tests that test my logic. If I had to start here mocking every single, I actually did it for the controller just to show you, but if I had to start mocking everything inside the controller, that would be a lot more work right here to make mock data like this. And this data would be very dependent on Firebase. So I would have to start mocking everything from Firebase. Notice how much data I actually end up mocking right here, just to make that simple call, mock, 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 mock. And then I can make the call, because I'm now dependent on Firebase. So I have to make a lot more mock data. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's why using this setup right here, and I have my services now, I can use basic TypeScript objects to mock my data. It's a lot easier to work with when we're talking testing. That's one thing. Another thing, I can now test my logic of my application independently of the different things that comes from the outside. So independently of if I'm using Firebase or Azure, both for my database and also for my functions, I can test everything in here, the logic of my application, right? So you can start making rule tests in here. You can make exceptions. If there are no products, you can make exceptions. So again, right now it's not doing a lot, but still this proves that I actually have access and I can actually start testing with Jest, because with this setup right here, I have proven that when I call write products, I have called the product repository set top products exactly 1 time.